President Trump under fire for failing to condemn in any way white supremacists, KKK, neo-Nazis by name, or distancing himself from these extreme groups. Let's bring back in our panel John Avlon, Ron Brownstein, Abby Phillip. And John, to you, it also goes to the question of who's around the president in the West Wing, right? The New York Times editorial board this morning notes that he consulted the president, a lot of people, before giving the remarks that he gave on Saturday where he didn't blame these groups. He just said many sides, many sides. He also has Steve Bannon around him, you know, who called Breitbart, which he founded, the platform for the alt-right.
A site that was oddly quiet in coverage.
Very.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Gorka, who said this just earlier this month.
It's this constant, oh, it's the white man, it's the white supremacist, that's the problem. No, it isn't, Maggie Haberman. Go to Sinjar. Go to the Middle East and tell me what the real problem is today. Go to Manchester.
So?
Yeah. So what you got here, I think, is a question of who was in the room when Donald Trump's remarks were being made? Who encouraged him not to call out these groups by name?
They say he spoke with a number of advisors.
Right, no, exactly. So
this wasn't out of haste.
Right, exactly. And that's what's troubling, right? And when you have a nationalist wing, an ethno-nationalist wing of political advisors driving a president's agenda, this is the kind of thing you get. You know, Breitbart has a complicated relationship, I don't know why I'm putting it politely, with issues of difference, particularly with the African-American community, with the Muslim community. Sebastian Gorka on Inauguration Day wore a medal from a Hungarian resistance group that gave an award to his father, which has been associated with Nazis in the past. This is not the kind of crew you typically see advising an American president. And you got to believe that these deliberate omissions by the president are driven, at least in part, by advisors who seem to have a vested interest in stoking these flames on the part of a portion of their base. Again, it's the ethno-nationalists. Let's not be too polite about it. That's another name for white nationalists.
Right. Well, look, you got the moral component, which, again, Abby, you laid out the right way. We're not used to hearing any contextual discussion of many sides when you're dealing with people that hate African Americans, Jews, Italians, Catholics. I mean, there are a lot of people that they put on their hateful little lists. You don't usually see any type of equivalency drawn on that or any type of limitation on condemnation of them. You also have a factual problem here. We talked about the logical one. Why are you so intent on calling out Muslims, but you won't dignify calling out Nazis? Doesn't make any sense logically. But the fact problem, why did David Duke say this? Listen to this.
We are determined to take our country back. We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump. That's what we believed in. That's why we voted for Donald Trump, because he said he's going to take our country back, and that's what we got to do.
Now, let's give the best defense in this situation, which is, hey, they are latching on to Trump wrongfully. He didn't want them. But you would think, if that's the case, you would deny them most of all if you were Trump or anyone around him, because that's the last thing you'd want. And then we get the kind of language that we had here, which is not doing that, to say the least, Abby.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be a pretty easy decision. David Duke says that you support that he supports Donald Trump. Trump supports him. It should be easy to say that's not true. I reject his support. I disavow him. I think, Chris, we should also really point out here that a White House aide, Sebastian Gorka, essentially glossing over white supremacy as a problem is a huge movement away from the norm. I think we cannot lose sight of that.
Right, and it's factually incorrect.
And it's
he said,
factually
go
incorrect.
to Sinjar. But we're not in Sinjar. We're in America.
Exactly.
And white supremacy is the #1 terror threat that they deal with in our government in this country.
Yeah, we cannot let that slide, because the reality is that's not something that would be acceptable in any other administration. I mean, but also, I think this White House is dealing with, yes, the president was advised by a lot of people. He heard a lot of input. There were a lot of people in the White House advising him to give a more fulsome response, as you can see based on the fact that Vice President Mike Pence did give a more fulsome response. But the president himself heard about what happened in Charlottesville, and he heard about the various groups descending on the city, and he was the one who decided we have to condemn all sides of this. There are a lot of folks within this White House, Trump aides, who believe that there is not enough condemnation of the quote unquote violent left as there is of the violent right. That is the wrong frame for this. I think that what you're hearing from Republicans outside of the White House, folks like Cory Gardner, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, is that there is no equivalency here. Wrong is wrong, right is right, and the White House needs to point that out. The president is the one making a decision not to do that.
Hey guys, just a note, after the horrific Paris terror attack on the Bataclan, etc., it was then civilian Donald Trump who tweeted, "When will President Obama issue the words radical Islamic terrorism? He can't say it, and unless he will, the problem will not be solved." Okay. Directly tying the language to the problem. Right. Hold on, you guys, really quickly. I do want to get to this. Think what you will about Anthony Scaramucci, the former White House communications director, and his short tenure in the White House. However, in his first interview yesterday, he called out Bannon, and he said he, being the president, has to move away from this sort of Bannon-Bart. Now, big picture here, CNN has reporting from multiple reporters of ours that Bannon is on the outs with the president. Could this hurt him more, Ron?
Sure. I mean, I think look, as I said before, I don't think there's anything surprising about this reaction from the president. It is exactly the pattern, the template that he has used before. I think what's different is if this would have happened in February, you would not have seen nearly as much reaction from Republicans as well as Democrats. There's a cumulative weight of things he has said and done that are outside the boundaries, outside the norms of what you would expect from a U.S. president that I think has kind of created a greater willingness to kind of criticize from the beginning. And, so we'll see. I mean, I think that, for Bannon, he has been, we talked about before, that being a continuum, not being a bright line separating these kinds of groups from others who are uneasy about demographic change. That has been part of the mission of Breitbart, I think, to break down those boundaries as a kind of a media institution. And to the extent that he continues to do that in the White House, I think he is more vulnerable now simply because there is this greater willingness to call out some of the things that the president said and done. Earlier, I think you would have heard Paul Ryan say something like, well, I can't comment on everything the president says. We need to get back to our agenda. Now you are seeing more Republicans saying this is unacceptable. This is outside the boundaries of what we would accept from a U.S. president.
And the president, who was not shy on Twitter, not shy about watching the show and commenting about what happens in real time, just tweeted, heading to Washington this morning. Much work to do. Focus on trade and military. Hashtag MAGA, Make America Great Again. Still no word from the president about what he knows he's being asked to clarify this morning. Appreciate it, panel. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Now, tomorrow on New Day, we're going to have former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. What does he believe led to his dismissal? What does he believe led to this weird situation that we're dealing with right now with what the president didn't say? Who would tell the president not to mention these kinds of groups, to go easy on them?
Also, a deadly terrorist attack in West Africa. Gunmen opened fire at a restaurant that is frequented there by foreigners. The late-breaking details are next.